signatures on documents, but we've moved a lot of that onto digital, so so it's not so imperative.
How's the situation in Malaysia? I heard that you guys are actually doing the main contracting for that. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's actually split. We're doing a portion of it, but there's a couple of local organisations that are also quite heavily involved in the distribution side of things as well.
Okay, but you guys are considered as the main distributor for it?
Probably not at the moment, because a lot of it has been, I think most of the vaccine's been Sinovac, and I think that's being distributed through the local vaccine organisation.
Okay, I thought it is Pfizer and because I thought I read you guys are actually doing the Pfizer and Moderna. No?
Yeah, we've certainly got Moderna. In most markets, we're doing Pfizer as well, and in some markets we're doing Sinovac too, but not Malaysia.
All right. Is it fill finish as well?
No.
Oh.
Just distribution.
Okay. Dr. Pronsak, it's me again, Tony.
Yes.
Thank you so much indeed to help us to moderate this session.
You're welcome. No problem.
So it's almost time. I will leave you guys to it, and Rose will take the opportunity to introduce everyone.
During the other parts of the program, do you want me to keep my video on or off?
Yes, you can keep your video on.
Okay.
Yeah, because we make it roundtable.
Okay, cool.
I will probably stop my video after my presentation, but I'll turn it back on when we get to the roundtable.
Sure, sir. Sawadika. Good morning and good evening to our friend from USA. My name is Rose Shitanuwat. I'm going to be the MC for the first session of today. Welcome everyone to the first joint CPHI Southeast Asia and Parenteral Drug Association Asia Pacific Industry Roundtable Talk. Today we are going to be all together about 3 hours. Firstly, I would like to introduce all of our panelists and the speaker today. I would like to welcome everyone to open the video when I name your name. The first one, we have our guest speaker from PDA, the Parenteral Drug Association. He is the president of the association, Mr. Richard Johnson. So he's with me here. Second, I would like to introduce our guest speaker from Select Pharma. He is the corporate head of quality assurance, Mr. Brett Marshall. He is going to speak about production and supply chain challenge and opportunities for Select Pharma. And together, as we all know that we have all the panelists who will joining our round table, which is from the association in ASEAN. So firstly, I would like to introduce our gentleman from Philippines, Pharmaceutical Manufacturer Association, Mr. Engineer Hijino JP. So we call JP in this. So second one from my country, Thailand. So Mr. Rachot Thakonsi from Thai Pharmaceutical Manufacturer Association. So the next one from our neighbor, Cambodia, Mr. Sian Cindy from, he is the president of Cambodian Pharmaceutical Distributor Association. And we have our friend from Indonesia. There are about 3 persons there. So firstly, Mr. Tetor Kusnadi, chairman of GP Pharmacy, together with Mr. Kendra and Mr. Vincent, who is the vice president of GP Pharmacy Indonesia. All right, so now it is the program will start. So I could not forget our moderator today, Professor Dr. Pornsak C. Amonsa. He is the Vice President of Thai Industrial Pharmacists Association. So he will be moderate the session of the question and answer and round table. So right now we will start the program with Mr. Richard Johnson to speak about the opening remarks and also about the PDA. Please, Richard.
Tell me if you can see my screen.
Yes.
So thank you for inviting me, and hello to all of my colleagues in Southeast Asia. I hope you all are doing well. I have just a few brief remarks that I will share with you. First, by way of introduction, I am the president of PDA globally, and it's my pleasure to join you here today. You know, this last year and this year have been a very challenging period for the whole world and certainly for our industry. I always like to start any presentations I've been doing by reminding us to remember all of those who've been directly impacted by the pandemic and also by the economic effects that are associated with it. It's very important that we remember to thank those people who've been on the front lines, the first responders, healthcare workers, and certainly don't forget our community, because it's our community that's providing the critical medicines, the continuity of safe and effective supplies, and through the development and distribution of vaccines, our hope for a future post-COVID. So again, on behalf of PDA, I'd like to thank all of you that are involved in that. You know, I checked this morning US time on August 23rd, and unfortunately, more than 211 million cases worldwide of COVID have been reported, and over 4.4 million deaths worldwide. I mean, there has not been such a global impact of anything in my lifetime. And I think for most of us, that would be the same thing. Unfortunately, around the world, we're seeing a very sporadic situation. It gets better in some areas, then we see a resurgence. And I think we're seeing that play out in many parts of Southeast Asia and Australia, New Zealand as well. Certainly even in the US and Europe, that's the case. So when I think about what has happened to pharmaceutical manufacturing, of which I spent most of my career, you know, the first priority was, how do you stay in production? Because of course, people still need these critical medical products. People still have accidents and other medical problems. So they need to keep getting those products. And we have to manage that with our workforce, who's also susceptible to having impact by COVID. There have been numerous supply chain issues, and I think perhaps we're going to hear some more about that, but there has been disruption. There have been demand increases for certain kinds of products, and it certainly has highlighted a need for redundancy in supply. APIs and some manufacturing sites have been dramatically impacted by the coronavirus and the associated import restrictions, and the demand needs to be able to be supplied nonetheless. Of course, from the very beginning, the focus has been on first developing and evaluating therapies, and certainly diagnostics, let's not forget, was very important at the beginning. And then the development and evaluation of vaccines, and in an unprecedented time, we have been able to get multiple vaccines into the hands of patients, or into the arms of patients. Prior to this, it was 4.5 years was the fastest vaccine that was ever approved, at least in the United States. And to have multiple vaccines approved in approximately a year is really unprecedented. But that's also bringing us to the next challenge, which is the scale up and distribution of vaccines. And that, I think, we're going to talk more about. In some ways, that's almost a bigger challenge, because you have to not only develop these vaccines, some of which are requiring very specialized conditions of storage, but then how do you scale up to manufacture? It can't be just one company. There have been numerous partnerships. Governments have been very active in underwriting this effort, and that's helped to speed up the availability of vaccines. Distribution channels have had to be set up to assure this deployment, and especially with these specialized conditions that some of these vaccines require, that's been challenging. But let's not forget that suddenly we're trying to provide somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 billion doses. That's more than the number of parenteral products that are produced in a typical year. So we're having to suddenly shift to make so many more doses of parenteral medications. And that's had impact on supply of delivery. Delivery devices like syringes and needles have been impacted, even for non-COVID products. Manufacturing materials have been impacted. And maybe when we get to the roundtable, we can talk more about that. And of course, it's unknown, how effective each of these vaccines are going to be, whether more than one vaccination is necessary, and how different strains may affect protection. And as we've seen, some of the vaccines that have been approved have been relatively effective against most of the strains that have emerged so far, but that's no guarantee that that will continue. So these are just an illustration of the kind of challenges that the industry is facing. On the regulatory side, what we've seen is that regulators have recognized in this period that there's been a need for collaboration on a level that has not existed before. There have been numerous mutual recognition agreements between health authorities, including PICs and regional alliances. And there have also been efforts on other cases where regulators are becoming more interdependent and sharing information with each other. I'd like to shift and just tell a little bit about PDA, because I understand some of your audience may be not so familiar. PDA is celebrating our 75th anniversary this year, so we've been around for quite a while. We are a global organization, individual member-based organization. We are founded to develop scientifically sound, practical, technical information and expertise to advance pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical manufacturing science and regulation, so that our members and the industry as a whole can better serve patients. And I'm proud to be part of that community. We do have chapters all around the world. And as you can see, we have several chapters in the Asia Pacific area. including Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and Australia, but we are also very interested in more collaboration. So if, I'm often asked, what is it that PDA does? What is it that characterizes our organization? And this slide illustrates that. So one of our key areas is sharing knowledge. So we do conferences. We have very well-respected and world-leading conferences on a variety of topics every year. We have training that's very renowned. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We have a number of different types of publications, and we have chapters, interest groups, and other platforms for members where, regardless of where they exist, to participate and to exchange information. So peer-to-peer communication. Of course, we also try to drive scientific consensus. Science is not black or white. It requires constant updating and scientific judgment. So we do that by getting teams of people together to develop technical reports, to do research on certain subjects. And in the last couple of years, we have become a standards developing organization, and we do that. Throughout all of that, we invite and have regulatory participation. So it's, the family that is PDA includes not just people from industry, but it also includes people from supplier companies and the health authorities. So they can have these exchanges and learn just like the rest of us. We do have collaborations with many other organizations, and I just listed a few there. So all of this is aimed at helping to develop and drive scientific consensus on what is the best practice as it relates to the manufacturing and control of pharmaceutical products. And finally, I've mentioned it, but it's very important that we engage with regulators. They have an important role in this area. We have joint conferences with regulators. We have a joint conference with FDA, the US FDA, coming up this next month. We have training partnerships that we've done with PICS, with ICH, and with FDA, in fact. PDA comments on a lot of draft regulatory documents. And by doing that, we try to inform them what do our members think is the most important things. And as I said, regulators are members. They are participators. They help write tech reports, or they review tech reports. So every technical document that we produce has either regulators who are members or are reviewers of those documents before they're finalized. I mentioned our training, and we do literally train thousands of people every year, but you might be interested to know that we train hundreds of regulators every year. US FDA, European regulators from different countries, and from the European Medicines Agency, from the Chinese FDA, PICS. We've had people from the HSA in Singapore come to our training. So we are very active in doing training on a variety of subjects. And since the pandemic, we have expanded our virtual training offerings dramatically. And you can contact our Asia Pacific office to learn more about those that we're doing in the time zone that's most convenient for people out there. If I had to characterize, what are the areas that we focus on? Of course, sterile manufacturing with a name like parenteral drug, that's a natural, and we've been doing that throughout our history. But what you may not realize is that we have been very active in biotechnology for more than almost 40 years now. So we were very early on in getting involved in biotechnology, and we're very strong in that area. We do a lot in manufacturing science. It's important to manufacture the products properly, not just inspect quality into them. And of course, we are very involved in developing guidance for quality and supply chain management. Some of our technical documents, I just have some examples here. We do publish a number of technical reports, and you can go to our website and you can see more about those. We publish points to consider, we publish surveys, and we do post our regulatory comments. So if you're curious as to what the rest of the industry might be thinking about a draft regulatory document, I would encourage you, if you're a member, to take a look at that. Specifically in Asia Pacific, the last time I measured it, that represents about 18% of our global membership. It is one of the fastest growing areas, and it certainly is a significant region for pharmaceutical and increasingly biologic manufacturing. So we are looking to expand that and also to increase the amount of participation. So we don't just want members, we would like to have people that participate in these activities I've just described. So very briefly, people always ask, well, how do you get involved? Well, yeah, most people don't start out on the board of directors. They start out somewhere else. So they can start by writing an article or posting something to our platform or contributing a scientific paper to our journal. They can volunteer to become a reviewer of one of these documents. They can speak at one of our chapter meetings or one of our conferences. If they have the skills, they could be potentially an education instructor. And then as you get more connected and more expertise, you can become a member of one of these task forces that develops these technical documents. You can work on a program planning committee, and then you get into leadership levels. And so I'll leave you with that. But the point is, we all, including me, I was a member for many years before I became president. And I can tell you, I didn't start out being, on the board of directors or as president. I started out by writing articles and being on planning committees and giving presentations, and eventually getting into more leadership roles. So be careful, because if you volunteer too much, you might become the president one day. So finally, I'll just leave you with this. The global pandemic has demonstrated the strengths and the weaknesses of our global supply chain. The only way we're going to get through this, and not just our community, but the whole world, is through a successful collaboration between governments, the biopharma industry, healthcare providers, and nonprofits, suppliers, and others. We have to resolve this pandemic and apply the lessons learned so that we will be better able to react to the next one that will come along. And let's never forget that millions, if not billions, of people around the world have been impacted and who are depending on us. So with that, I'll leave you with some contact information, and I'll be glad to take any questions later on when it becomes appropriate. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Richard. You are giving the big picture overview and also introduce about PDA. So now we are going to listen to one of our speakers that really focus on the supply chain, because the nature of business of Cessation Pharma. So may I invite Mr. Brett Marshall. He is the corporate head of quality assurance at Cessation Pharma. So Brett will talk about production and supply chain challenge and opportunities.
Thanks, Rose. I think you have the presentation there that you're going to share for me.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And certainly thank you to Richard for introducing this meeting today, and obviously quite late in the US, so it's been great to have him on the call. And before I launch into my presentation, I'd just like to also add my kind of comments on the value that PDA as an organisation plays. As I'll describe, in some of the slides that are to come, establishing a quality management system for the distribution sector of the supply chain that we manage is really important, and we do that to international standards. So sometimes people in Europe and the US don't understand that the infrastructure and the systems, the processes that we have in place are world standard. We take the inputs from international regulators, the US FDA, MHRA, EMA, and the industry associations, ICH, and Richard touched on PICS as well. It's been very strong growth in Asia for PICS. But also the industry associations like PDA, which really help provide further clarity on the development of regulations and how we can implement the compliance requirements that we have. And that's what we put into a quality management system, because we're effectively translating our international quality compliance obligations into a way that our people can work. And PDA really has helped that happen. So I'm glad to be here this morning. I'm going to talk on the topic of production and supply chain challenges. Certainly Richard's given some colour to the production side, and I know we have some esteemed panellists here who know a lot more about the production side than I do, so I won't go into great detail. But I think the situation that we're facing with COVID has been very interesting, because it's really forced people to understand supply chains and the way they operate as never before. But one thing that's very different about the pharma supply chain and the supply chain for life science is that it's not manufacturing cell phones, and we're not manufacturing clothing. We're manufacturing products that have a therapeutic impact on people through their consumption. So we are dealing with people's lives. And that's what makes this supply chain so interesting and so important to have right. If I can go to the next slide, I'll just give a quick introduction to Zuellig Pharma. We're one of the leading healthcare services providers in Asia. We've been here in Asia for over 100 years. So since our foundation in the Philippines in 1922, we've expanded our reach across 13 countries. And with a clinical reach logistics capability, we add a further 4 countries to that footprint, with India, China, Japan, and Australia. Through those 13 countries, we're delivering to over 200,000 customers, hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, and other outlets. And we do that through a network of 80 distribution centres, all of them with capability for managing temperature-controlled requirements for the pharma industry. And that gives us about 350,000 pallets worth of storage through the region. If we can jump to the next slide. We've heard from Richard the global impact of COVID and the vaccine challenge that COVID has represented. But I think there are some unique challenges which continue to exist in Asia, and certainly the supply side of the equation has not been well met so far, and so the demand for vaccines within the countries that we live far outstrips their availability, and is likely to continue to do so through to the end of the year. So there's some very big targets being set by WHO for vaccination of populations, but we continue to see supply side issues which are impacting availability. Some of the key challenges are around the manufacturing side, and I know we're going to spend a bit of time on that this morning. But certainly from a global aspect, we saw manufacturing capability or capacity established fairly quickly in Europe and the US. And a number of developers of vaccine products who then leveraged network expansion through contract manufacturing organisations, and they put that in place quite quickly. So that allowed Europe and the US to scale up quite quickly to meet their requirements. In Asia, we haven't been quite so blessed with manufacturing capacity, and particularly for vaccines. And certainly, I think that's something that we will look at going forward, and how we establish future capabilities. In terms of logistics, there have been challenges in terms of moving from what we call managing what we call the lab to jab supply chain, if you could think of it that way. But it's basically being able to move product from the production facilities in Europe and the US to the points of vaccination here in Asia. And that has required a great number of stakeholders coming together to collaborate to be able to put what essentially needs to be a zero defect supply chain together. Never have we seen a situation where demand so clearly outstrips supply. And so the integrity of the supply chain that we put in place is extremely important. And as Richard touched on, this is a challenge that we can't solve as individual companies. We need to be part of a broader community of stakeholders that delivers the answers. Richard also touched on the regulatory side of things, and I think it's certainly an area where just in recent days I've become more aware of just how much progress international regulators have made in their approach to being able to authorise products for use, particularly vaccine products, and how they've become aware that the way that we managed emergency use and market authorisation for COVID is a requirement that we will need to establish for the future, because COVID is not the last pandemic that we're going to face. And so this has required action at a regulatory level as well as an international level. And a large number of organisations have been involved in that process. Richard touched on the role of WTO, WHO, the International Forum of Regulators for Pharma, as well as the International Forum for Regulators of Medical Devices. ICH and PICS have all been involved in that process too. One of the things that's really derailed the availability of vaccines, and particularly in Asia, is the nationalism of vaccine management, so the cessation of vaccine exports. And that impacted in two areas. The first was a reduced export capability out of Europe, and the second is almost a zero capability for export of vaccines from India. And India had tried to establish itself as being a prime source of medications and particularly vaccines for the developing world. So being able to manufacture and supply to Asia, to Africa, to South America. But unfortunately, with the COVID situation in that country, the capacity has been focused very much on generating for their national consumption. And so that has also had an impact on Asia. Vaccine hesitancy has been an issue. This depends very heavily on educating the public, but there have been in certain countries a relatively high level of vaccine hesitancy. And this has impacted the use of available vaccines in some of those countries. We've seen a number of different procurement options for governments, and obviously the models are evolving as the need becomes greater, and the fact that planned procurement and planned supplies have not arrived. But in most cases, the purchasing relationship is between governments and the manufacturers direct. So for operators like ourselves, that's a little different. Usually the purchasing relationship will sit with us, and we'll purchase from the manufacturer and supply to the market. So these relationships are a little different. We've also seen a grouping of organisations under the COVAX banner, that's WHO, CEPI and Gavi, who are looking to supply to the Asia region about 695 million vaccine doses by the end of this year. I think that's going to be a challenge unless we start to see an increased level of supply to Asia. I think that target might be challenged. And then we've also seen tripartite agreements being established. So private industry organisations becoming involved in the purchasing process and funding purchases for governments. But the contractual relationship still remains between government and manufacturer. So it's been quite an interesting scenario. And then we've also seen vaccine diplomacy, and obviously China having provided several hundred million doses, particularly of Sinovac so far, has been the lead donor. But the US in recent times, with its donations to a range of countries, we've seen Russia initially push its vaccine. Then it's been through a quiet time, but once again we're starting to see that vaccine come into the Asia region. And as I touched on earlier, vaccines coming out of India, while we had expected to have capacity, that hasn't been realised as yet. If we could jump to the next slide. So I'll talk just very quickly on what we call the two-market supply chain, which is specifically for vaccines outlined in this chart. And it's quite a nice chart that I picked up from a World Trade Organization symposium, which was held a couple of weeks ago. And the link for that symposium is in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. It's a very interesting symposium that looks at vaccine supply chain and the regulatory transparency. So if you're interested, I strongly suggest you have a look at that. There are papers to read, and also there are YouTube videos to watch. But it really gave great background as to the way that the international community, regulators as well as manufacturers, are approaching the production supply chain. So from manufacturing, we talked about how we can expand capacity with the use of contract partners, but also some of the inputs to the manufacturing process. And again, I'm sure that many of the attendees in this session have a far better knowledge than I do. But it's really struck me that this side of the supply chain has become more transparent to me, and given me a greater understanding of the constraints on the production side. And that many of these inputs themselves are the subject of a production process which can also be constrained. So while we've been able to ramp up approval and limited expansion of capacity and delivery of vaccines into Asia, these are some of the constraints that we continue to face. And as Richard touched on, there was already a shortage of sterile fill and finish capacity prior to COVID, and so we've now seen a dramatic investment in capital and plants to expand capacity in this area as well. And this is perhaps one of the most interesting areas for some of the manufacturers around the Asian region that make themselves or put themselves in a position to be able to provide such services to their manufacturing partners. I won't talk too much more about production for the moment, and I'll jump across to distribution, which is really our area of expertise in the area that we've been most involved with. And as you'll see from the next slide, this is a very complex part of the supply chain. If we could jump to the next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through the detail of this slide, but what I want to create here is an understanding of the complexity of the supply chain that we manage for pharma products across the countries that we operate in Asia. And because we're dealing with international manufacturing clients, then the services that we provide need to be provided to international standards as well. So that's putting in place the documentary agreements around the distribution and the quality, and it's driving the way that we manage, as I touched on earlier, the quality management system that sits across the warehouses that we operate, the inventory that we're managing, the transport and delivery to our more than 200,000 customers, and then how we manage the performance of that supply chain as well. And because we manage the 13 countries, looking at from a regional level how we can continue to develop our capabilities, and certainly as we've seen the adoption of digital opportunities and digital transformation in the pharma sector at a much more rapid pace as an outcome of COVID, then certainly we're looking to see how we can utilise that as well. So there's a constant drive for continuous improvement, a constant drive for us to keep our QMS reflective of the industry changes and the regulatory changes, the technology changes we're seeing, and the system changes that we see as well. So this is quite a complex operation that we manage. Next slide. Some of the challenges that we've seen across the frame of COVID vaccine supply are around the key areas of funding and procurement, entry to country, receiving and storage, transport and delivery, ordering and implementation, and reverse logistics and reporting. So I'll just call out a couple of key points under each of these headings. I touched on the purchase arrangements or the procurement arrangements, and particularly how funding sources are being diversified. Certainly many country budgets in Asia are being stretched by not just the spend on vaccines, but the support of the hospital systems and the support processes and staff as well. Certainly there are a range of stakeholders who are involved in supplying the product to market, and the way that they operate to international standards needs to be confirmed. And as we touched on, with vaccines at ultra low temperatures as we haven't seen before, at -20 and -80, then the packaging of systems it also becomes quite important. Also, as governments acquire the vaccines, we've seen a variety of strategies for the deployment of the vaccination process. Some depend very highly on hospital infrastructure, and some are more diverse in the sense of using community systems and community centres and those types of things. But it's really put a tremendous pressure on the availability of healthcare workers to support that process also. Entry into country, we've touched a couple of times on the regulatory process, and I think there's some quite rapid movement in US and European regulation, and I think that's something that we'll need to also adopt if we possibly can for the Asia region as well. But certainly we've seen customs organisations collectively agreeing to green lane treatment for inbound product, which has been extremely helpful. The management of airport facilities and for the offloading and then transport to distribution centres, and the quality of packaging and infrastructure around that's been very important. And we touched on vaccine hesitancy, so it's important to build community understanding and acceptance of the vaccine process and the benefits that vaccines provide for the healthcare of the population. Infrastructure, I touched on the requirement to be at international standard, and so that's embedding the processes that you as manufacturers would be really familiar with in terms of validation and qualification of the processes, the systems, the infrastructure that we have in place, and particularly for the ultra-low temperature storage and handling that we've seen. So also in terms of the people who are involved in handling those products, the training of those people. The systems that we use to support this part of the supply chain also qualified and validated prior to use. Also, the management of the product, as we've seen, varying shelf lives for the vaccine products, depending on the temperatures at which they're being stored. And so that's needed to have fairly strong procedural support to manage appropriately. And for the future, as we start to see demand in line with supply, hopefully we'll start to see a more effective management process, which involves the use of data analytics to make the vaccination management process in terms of inventory and then supply to vaccination centres more effective. Packaging I've touched on already, the temperature monitoring capabilities, so transparency of integrity and storage integrity from production through to patient is extremely important. Not all components can be supported by technology today, but that is an evolutionary requirement. We will certainly see the technology being developed over the next 6 to 18 months. Transport security has had added focus. We've seen in a number of markets the rise of fake and counterfeit products, including vaccines, which is extremely sad in a time of such dire need. So not just transport security, but security across the supply chain has become a key area of focus for regulators, for governments, and for international organisations such as Interpol and the Pharmaceutical Security Institute. Being able to manage the delivery of available supplies across a number of vaccine sites has also been quite a challenge. Obviously, the geography and the time components need to be effectively managed. And this has to be done in compliance with international quality standards. The vaccination strategy, we've touched on how that can vary across the countries. Equitable allocation for available supplies is a challenge for governments, and there's no doubt about that. Availability and training of healthcare personnel to administer the vaccines, as I touched on, depending on the strategy, that also is a very large resource requirement. Strict adherence to vaccination protocols, and then the use of digital tools in the vaccine management process with patients as well. Because most of these vaccines are operating under emergency use licenses, there is a very strong focus on pharmacovigilance and the need to support the reporting of adverse events. And so that's really putting additional stress on the systems that are available, the training that's provided, and getting information rapidly to both manufacturers and regulators. The reverse logistics process, so once vaccination has been completed with patients, again, making sure that we keep a closed supply chain to remove the opportunity for fake vaccines and counterfeit vaccines using used vials. Most of the Asian countries have the appropriate product destruction capabilities in place with incineration at above 800 degrees C. So that reverse logistics process is extremely important. And I've talked about the proliferation of fake and counterfeit vaccines, but also the capability for digital solutions to provide transparency of integrity in terms of manufacturing and delivery for the satisfaction of doctors and patients, I think is going to be important. We've seen some early models implemented, but I think that type of technology will continue to deliver. So this has been, as you can see, a number of challenges that we've seen in in the supply chain for pharma and vaccines in terms of to-market delivery as well as in-market delivery, and something that we will continue to see evolve. Certainly, as we've seen the rise of the Delta variant, it has once again put populations back into pressure with lockdowns more prevalent than they were at this time last year, and the consequences also looking quite stern. So the need for us to be able to bring product from the manufacturing locations in Europe and in the US and in China also into our markets, I think is extremely important. Just before I finish off, I'll just give a final plug to PDA. We have a number of events which are coming up, which if I can just jump to the next slide, I'll quickly mention those, and then I think we can jump into the country briefing. So there's an upcoming conference around manufacturing and quality. So the 2021 PDA Pharmaceutical Manufacturing and Quality Conference, which is in mid-September. 3 days of what will be excellent material with a range of industry experts from around the globe. So we've got Rick Friedman, who's the Deputy Director of Science and Regulatory Policy from the US FDA talking, Don Singer, who is Senior Microbiology Technical Consultant at Ecolab, and also Donna Reba, who's formerly a microbiologist with Pfizer. So some great insights to be shared from that conference. Next slide. We also have the 2021 PDA Clean Room Qualification Conference. That's on the 17th of September. That's a part of the earlier conference, I think. And again, some industry experts, Ziva Abraham, Morgan Pollan and Ulrich Herber, who are presenting in that conference. And then the final event is on aseptic. Next slide, please. The 2021 PDA Aseptic Processing of Biopharmaceuticals. So this is another excellent event in October, again with industry experts, Jeremy King and David King, who will be joining us for that conference. So really excellent for industry knowledge and idea sharing, similar to the event that we have today. I look forward to joining the panel for some questions, and I'll pass back to you, Rose.
Thank you, Brett. So this is the clear information how supply chain really involved in today's vaccine situation. So right now we come to the session of the association sharing. So I would not waste time much. I will go direct to the first association to share. We have Engineer JP with me. So he is the president of Philippines Pharmaceutical Manufacturer Association. And today the presentation will cover also by working together with the Philippines Chamber of Pharmaceutical Industry. So JP, I give to you for 10 minutes to cover on how's the situation in Philippines.
Okay, amazing morning, everyone. And amazing evening for those in the United States. So kindly share, Rose, my presentation. I'll be talking about the Philippine pharma industry update. But before we go into that, let me share with you how the Philippine pharmaceutical industry looks like at a glance. Next page, please. In 2019, just prior to the pandemic, the Philippine pharma industry is valued at $178 billion, almost $4 billion. And it is the third largest in Southeast Asia, third to Indonesia and Thailand, and second in terms of growth in the last 5 years, second to Vietnam. 71% of the medicines are prescription drugs, And about only 40% of the products, pharmaceutical products being sold in the Philippine market are locally manufactured, and more than 60% are imported. In fact, in the last 5 years, there was an 11% increase in the importation. Two-thirds of the Philippine pharma market or Philippine pharma industry are composed of multinational brands. And 98% of our raw materials are imported from different countries. Only 2% are locally produced. Next slide, please. We are capable for research and development for the natural and synthetic drugs. We have efficient and effective warehousing, logistics, and distribution facilities. We can manufacture solids, liquids, semi-solids, topical, dry powders, effervescent, parenterals, injectables, except vaccine, which is most needed in this time of pandemic. Currently, with the current government, we have strong government and private partnership. Next slide, please. Now, these are the opportunities for growth and partnership. As I said, Philippine pharmaceutical industry growth is among the fastest in the world. And in Southeast Asia, we will be growing 8 to 11% average in the next 5 years. The implementation of the Universal Healthcare Program by the new government will give opportunity for local manufacturers and foreign traders to participate in the supply of pharmaceutical products through government bids, because we have big budgets for the government in providing not just basic health services to the Filipinos, 111 million Filipinos, but providing the needed medicines. And this will give big opportunity for not just local manufacturer, but foreign manufacturers of medicine. Faster growth among the middle income class, fourth in the world, next to China, India, Indonesia, and we grew 11% in 2019. Based on the 2020 Euromonitor. And with this growing middle income class, there is more money to spend on the basic needs of the population, especially the need for the medicine. Next slide, please. Okay, we've consistently shown the high GDP growth, 6%, above 6% in the last 5 years, and will have a strong comeback in 2021 after suffering negative 8% growth in 2020 due to the pandemic. There is strengthening of collaboration between government and industry players. There are opportunities in biotechnology and vaccine production locally. Local production of rigid and flexible packaging materials. There is also a big opportunity because most of these are imported right now. Next slide, please. Now, I'll tackle the impact of COVID-19 on the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical supply is significantly restricted, lower than needed, not only by the limited logistics due to quarantine restrictions, but also more significantly by the delay in the release of marketing authorizations, without which the pharmaceutical companies cannot release the product in the market. Next slide, please. There is difficulty in the supply of active pharmaceutical ingredients because most of our APIs are coming from India and China, and India restricted the outflow of the active pharmaceutical and finished goods products or medicines. And most of these most of the supply in the Philippines are coming from this country. And we have also have to look for other source. In such a case, we need to do validation, stability, and apply for variation and approval for this variation. And currently, we have difficulty in securing the variation approvals. Supply of primary packaging materials, not just the API, need to be sourced also from other manufacturers and suppliers. And we have difficulty in the approval of variation from FDA. Next. The cost of materials, especially for products used in the prevention and the management of COVID-19 infection, increased by 20 to 50% due to global supply problem. The manufacturer absorbed the increase in the cost as we cannot pass this on to the consumers. Additional operating costs incurred in continuing the production operation during the community quarantine, like transportation, meals, PPEs, disinfectants, hazard pays, and these have to be absorbed by the manufacturer. Next. Commissioning and acceptance test of equipment machines purchased from other countries cannot be conducted due to restrictions in travels of technicians needed. Thus, many of these equipment and machines remain idle due to the delay in the implementation for production use. And large number of low-risk to no-risk application at the FDA are still pending, preventing the supply of needed medicine. But in the last 3 months, actually 3 months ago, legislators, especially the Philippine Congress, the Committee of Health and Committee of Public Accountability, met to review and amend current laws aimed at improving the delivery of services of DOH and Philippine FDA to achieve self-sufficiency in the supply of medicines. Focus was given to support the local manufacturer. Next slide. In fact, 2 months, and I am part of this committee, we made a joint memorandum circular for the establishment of green lane for securing permits and licenses and authorization for the establishment and operation of bulk import, fill and finish local coronavirus disease vaccine manufacturing facility, and for the registration for availment of incentives. So there were 2 companies who availed of this, but unfortunately, we cannot yet manufacture fully the vaccine from the scratch, from the start. So we are importing the bulk from China and doing the filling and the packaging here in the Philippines. But this green lane will also apply for several companies who are applying now for the establishment of vaccine facility here in the Philippines. But it will take us 2 to 3 years to have that. Next. And the objective is to create green lane that would set the expedited and streamlined process and requirements in the issuance and permits, licenses, and authorization relative to the establishment and operation of bulk import, fill and finish local COVID vaccine manufacturing facility, and to provide for the facilitated registration in the availment of incentives for bulk import, fill and finish local COVID-19 vaccine manufacturing facility. Next page, please. So these are the signatories to that joint memorandum circular, the Secretary of the Department of Health, the Secretary of Department of Trade and Industry, and the Anti-Red Tape Authority, the Department of Science and Technology, the Chief Implementer of the National Task Force Against Coronavirus Disease, and the Director General for the Food and Drug Administration. Okay. Currently, the Department of Trade and Industry is now facilitating the crafting of Philippine pharma industry roadmap, participated in by the various stakeholders in the pharma industry, and I'm part of the technical working group as president of the Philippine Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, I think we're gonna have a lot of questions to Sir JP next in the panel discussion, especially very interesting program on the vaccine facility. So I'm coming to my country already. So this is going to be the presentation from Thailand. So there will be our association, the Thai Pharmaceutical Manufacturer Association by Mr. Rashad Thakonsi, Vice President of the association. So he's going to cover a bit on the challenge that we are facing and the new implementation that's going to take place in Thailand. So I pass this to Mr. Rashad, please.
Good morning, everyone from Thailand. And thank you for all the openings and sharing so far. We've been enjoying a lot of information, and so please can you prepare my presentation. As Mr. JP, President of PPA, has mentioned, many of the challenges occurs among Asian countries quite similar. Okay, and so I would not try to repeat everyone else's presentation. Today, I will provide some updates for Thailand and hope this will be useful for everyone. So please, next slide. Okay, so my agenda today is to briefly reintroduce to TPMA and touches on the two updates. First, the GDP implementation in Thailand, and second, bubble and seal policy, which I will explain later. Next, please. So as you may already know, TPMA, which stands for Thai Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Association, has been established since 1969. So it's more than 50 years of organization. Our duty mission is to promote our industry to become pharmaceutical hubs for at least among ASEAN countries, to elevate the quality levels, management levels for the members, exchange information so that we can share some knowledge among each other, and make sure that our practices, ethics, we have a big improvement or progression in this area for the last 2 years. So we are now in the full implementation of the ethics. And most importantly, especially now during this pandemic, is the access to the medicines, where we need to continue our operation among this pandemic, and we have to find way to operate, which I will share you in the bubble and seal section. Next slide, please. Okay, so for GDP implementation, Thai FDA already have announced that we will fully implement this GDP on the 1st of January next year. So the quality audit will be done by the Thai FDA themselves. Okay, there will be no outsourcing. The requirements are fully addressed for all the companies with licensees who wish to perform the distribution, starting from quality measurement, personnel, premises, and all this requirement. I think Brad from Zurich has already mentioned in detail on how they manage. So similar expectation practices will be expected from the Thai FDA. The announcement will be focused on the modern medicine products. As you may notice why I mentioned about this is because last 2 years we have passed a new act for Thai herbal medicine products. And now the Thai herbal medicine products are now in a different law than the pharma, modern pharma. So the GDP are now only required for the pharma modern medicine products, not the herbal products. Okay, and focus on the human veterinary use only, and focus on the finished product and API and excipient. Next slide, please. Okay, so giving you this picture so that you would understand that the GDP implementation in Thailand now going to be in phase 1, meaning that it will only focus on the manufacturing side, on the licensee, not on the hospitals and pharmacy yet. So GDP is now going to be implemented January 1st while the good pharmacy practice trying to having more strictly implementation in the hospitals and drugstore, but most likely will be implemented in enforcement in phase 2, not for phase 1. Okay, next slide, please. In general, Thai FDA would categorize factory in 3 parts: high risk, medium, and low. For high risk are those licensee who need to distribute in cold chain in the special environment and who are already distribute for more than 2 companies. Medium risk for the company itself that they're going to distribute and not for special cold chain condition. And low risk for those companies who most likely are now using outsource. Next, please. Okay, now I will try to get into the new policy in a little more detail. Okay, it's calling bubble and seal. Okay, these are the practice that will be required by the government for those factories that already have a worker in their workplace that got infected by the COVID-19. So this measure is introduced to keep the production running, even though their worker are already been infected by COVID-19. Okay. So for those production line, okay, they need to do the risk assessment and grouping people into 4 groups. Okay. Next, please. Now, when we call bubbles, meaning that we going to grouping people within the worker themselves, so that each group or each bubble should have not more than 20 people. This is because when someone in the same bubble got infected, people in other bubbles will have less or low chance of getting infected. Okay, next, please. Now, of course, manufacturing, we cannot segregate bubbles individually, so that many of the activities requires each bubbles to intersect or doing together. This is also allowed, but full protection and short period of time only. Okay, next, please. Next slide, please. Yes. Okay, now for people who get infected, in the picture is F0. Okay, so F0, if they already get tested positive, of course, this person needed to go to the hospital right away. But people or workers who work in the same unit, F1, are now going to be classified as high risk. These people are the one that the company needs to manage carefully. So they need to put this group of people in the quarantine area, which I will explain later. There's 2 options to that. But the rest of the people, the green people, are still able to work. Okay, next, please. Now, okay, for the orange, yellow people that I mentioned, okay, we need to, the red people we mentioned, we need to send these people, okay, to the hospital right away. So that is obvious. I think that's going to be done. Okay, next, please. Now, for people in the yellow zone, okay, we need to put those people in the quarantine area. This is not the same facility for infected people. Okay, this is the quarantine area for those with high risk only, meaning are still testing negative, not positive for COVID. So company required to do what they call factory accommodation isolation. This could be done either by contracting outsource to the hospitals or clinics or special apartment, or setting up their own facility within the company or the factory themselves. Okay, please, next. Company also need to arrange private transportation, okay, because mixing the transportation with the public could having higher chance for the worker to get infected. So this is going to be the requirement. Next, please. And the company also required to prepare necessary food for worker to work. especially for the special preparation to ensure that all the ingredient and the process of making food are being hygiene. Next, please. Now, this is also a new requirement from the Thai government, is to have the antigen tests on a weekly basis based on the risk assessment, meaning that if the company access a certain group of people to have a high risk, this group of people would require to have the ATK done weekly. Okay, next please. Okay, so factory can not having to implement the bubble and seal policy if number of people, meaning people who already been infected and have their own immune system after being recovered, or people already have 2 jabs or vaccinated, or some people already have high immune themselves. Total of this more than 80 or 85%. So a factory with those group of people do not require to do a bubble and seal. Next, please. So the challenges for the Thai industry, number one is that to prepare ourselves for the GDP requirement, and not many of the outsourced distribution local one are ready for that. So this is going to be a challenge. Second is on the bubble and seal, which I already have mentioned. Okay, thank you very much for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Khun Rashod. So very unfortunate that that would be the cost occur and pump up into the cost of production for Thai manufacturers. So if you have any question, put in the Q&A box that we can go to the panel discussion later on. So there is some slight change on the program. So now I'm going to invite the Indonesia group to share the presentation. We have with me the Pak Kendra and Pak Vincent from GP Pharmacy, the Indonesian Pharmaceutical Association. So please, Pak.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm great to see all of you here, especially speaker and also the team from Informa Markets. So from Indonesia, I and Pak Vincent, I am actually a chairman of Indonesian Pharma Material Management Club and also Deputy Secretary General of Indonesian Pharmaceutical Association. And Pak Vincent is Vice Chairman of PMMC and also head of raw material or committee. So you want to talk about a little bit about raw material API in Indonesia, and I talk this time only for market in Indonesia, because what I'm thinking that nowadays during the pandemic era, I think that the important thing that the market, whether we still keep the market growth or not. So maybe starting from presentation. Yang mana? Yang pertama dulu. Oh, yang itu, yang paling atas dong. Yeah, today that I want to give a presentation actually based on the Investor Daily is the newspaper or magazine, a very reputable magazine in Indonesia. So from magazine for Investor Daily, they want to see that the growth of Indonesian during the pandemic. This is very important that you will know that whether Indonesia is still a growing market or declining. So the second is we also find all data from IMS or international market survey. So two different criteria. I will show you that so you know what is the positive or negative. I'm starting from Indonesian pharma industry. You see that from pharma industry that we consist of 4 state-owned company, and about 178 is a local company, and multinational company is around 24. So from this data, you know that the total market in Indonesia around 4 to 5 billion US dollar. And the share of local company is around 75%, and the multinational is 25%. So the growth of the local company around 7%, and multinational around 15%. So in Asian market, that we are about 27%. So maybe Pak Vincent, this time that you want to share about API market or API development in Indonesia. Please, Pak Vincent.
Thank you, Pak Kendra. I just would like to add some data, especially regarding the situations in Indonesia for raw material or API, so active pharmaceutical ingredient. As you know, as we also heard from the Philippines, that raw material or API in Indonesia also we still import 95% of the raw material. The total market itself, if as Pak Kendra said, the finished products is around 5 to 6 billion US dollar. So we have around 1 billion US dollar market for the active pharmaceutical ingredient. At the moment, due to the pandemic COVID-19, we have also a problem regarding the especially if we importations. So we still import mostly from China and India. We got a problem for the transportation, for example, the increase of price, which influence also our price in Indonesia. That is what my comments on the raw material. So let Pak Kendra continue the presentations.
Thank you, Pak Vincent. So another data also is good for us. So from investor diary, the magazine or the newspaper.
Pak Kendra, apologize. The sound is not as loud as.
Now you can hear.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sorry. So from this slide, you will see that the investor diary, especially number 4, about pharmaceutical industry. Last year, we grew around 9%. It's very good for us, actually. And we expect that this year, 2021, it will grow double digit. Yeah, hopefully it will happen. That, of course, that we are in Indonesia also preparing many things to achieve that. Another slide. Here that you can see that the growth of PDB for other field market in Indonesia, you will see that for jasa kesehatan is and about healthcare business in Indonesia, that so the percentage is quite high, 16.5%. So it means that Indonesia still have a promising market for pharmaceutical industry or business. And my next slide. My last slide, it is come from the IMS or International Pharma survey. Here that is quite different, but I think that it can be also considered as what is a data for us for pharmaceutical industry to aware that we are still also having a difficulty to meet some growth in pandemic era. So if you see that the total market in total that we are still minus 20%, was 12.6%. And you see that the ethical product minus 12.6 and OTC product 10.4. Actually, that I give you this what is figures compared to the first figure or second figure from Investor Daily, just to show that Indonesia also have to do something to grow according to what we expect in the future. But now that we are still have a spirit to have a country who have a promising pharmaceutical market. I think that one from Indonesia. So thank you for this opportunity, and say hello to my friend Jamie Pyong. I don't know if he still remember me or not. Maybe Pak Vincent want to talk something?
Yeah. Ladies, gentlemen, so I would like to add some, because some of our friends also talk about the vaccine. This is also a problem in Indonesia, because we understand that we started imported Sinovac vaccine from China. But of course that we can get a limited quantity. And as you know, that the problem is that we have now 270 million people. That's the problem, and it's in whole archipelago of Indonesia, so it is not easy to reach until the edge of the country. But of course that we would like to try to achieve, let's say 70 or 75% to achieve the herd immunity for the whole country. So we are waiting at the moment to reach, if it is one dose, 70% is around 180 million. So 2 doses of vaccine, we need 360 million doses. That's also that the government, together with the people, because we have gave the understanding that it should not be only the government, but all of the people should participate in this to reach, at least to get 360 million vaccine. That's all. That's our difficulty regarding the to cover the COVID-19, or especially we are worried also to have the new variants of the virus. Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Kendra and Pak Vincent. Apart from the worrying that you have for the country to reach 70%, but at least Jakarta already reached 70% herd immunity. So congratulations, at least that you are going to reopen the city soon. So right now we come to the last part of the presentation. We have with me Mr. Siang Cindy, but he is going to cover the update on the COVID-19 situation in Cambodia, because we hardly see the news on the Cambodia situation on the COVID. And today the Manufacturer Association cannot join, so I invite Mr. Cindy to share a bit on the movement, then we all together can see what we can do and support each other in ASEAN. So Cambodia, please.
Good evening, everyone. Today, in this event, I want to update situation of COVID-19 in Cambodia. I am the President of Cambodian Pharmaceutical Distributor Association and also Director of my own company. Because of the association manufacturer that had to join this event, they will be absent. So I am replaced him. So I want to present the short brief of the situation in COVID-19 in Cambodia. So next slide, please. Yes. Yes. So next slide, please. Yeah. COVID-19 in Cambodia. COVID-19 coronavirus Cambodia, the same other country in Asia or in the world, are affected by this coronavirus. More people in Cambodia affected, more people is adult. Children are less. In Cambodia, this pandemic happened in the two phases. The first phase from early 2020 to March 2021. In that period, it had only 10 to 20 cases per day. But after it has second wave from April this year till today. So increased so much from 400 to 700 cases per day. And now we also has a new variant Delta form, B1617.1. Recently defined in all provinces, total 26 provinces, except 2 provinces we not yet find. Next slide, please. So total case in Cambodia on 21 August 2000 this year, total infection 88,735, total death 1,778, total interdependent 2,451, total sure 85,506, and also traveler from abroad 13,993. The treatment in Cambodia only under government authority, not allowed private clinic to treat or for the beginning. But till now, the second wave, so hospital, government hospital cannot afford, so they allow some private hospital or clinic to test and treat COVID-19 patient. But now, till today, the pandemic of COVID-19 in Cambodia is still under control. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. First wave, the first I want to say in Cambodia, treatment for COVID is free, not charge any money from the patient. So in the first wave, Cambodian government appoint specialized hospital in Phnom Penh to treat the patient, because in that time it had less patient. But for second wave, the number of patients increased so much. So specialized hospital cannot afford, so they increase the number of hospital in Phnom Penh and also in province, and also they create the using of the place like hotel, public place, apartment to transform to be center for COVID-19 for mild case. So in divide this, we divide in serious and mild case. Serious case we send to specialized hospital, and mild case we send to center for COVID-19. Next slide, please. So test also is free. We make in mass rapid test. For the beginning, we only use the PCR. So we collect all sample from the patient, from the people, and send to national lab for testing. But recently we have the rapid test. So rapid test, people can buy and do by themselves. So in Cambodia, they have appointed many volunteer medical group to take sample from the patient and also to vaccinate the patient. And this program is still underway. Next slide, please. So mass vaccination till 19 August 2021. We get vaccine from Sinovac and Sinopharm through the donation and also buy, and also from the it are 2 cases. And now we got some AstraZeneca and Johnson through the COVID program. So for vaccination, we achieve total 9,388,735. In the women 4,721,386. 7,687. And second vaccination, we just got 7,662,263. Women, 3,883,157. So now, because of the behind problem, after second vaccination, we have found also some the infection people. So now we try, government try to make the third vaccination. And third vaccination from the same vaccine, Sinopharm, and also some from AstraZeneca. So we just start third vaccination, the total 391,401, and women 129,492. And also we provide vaccination card for them. Okay, next slide, please. So vaccination achievement of vaccination program in Cambodia in 20 August MOA report compared to target 10 million 58,000 teenager from 12 to 20 years just start this month because Cambodia just start vaccination to teenager this month. So it just got 42.95% compared to total population. We got 59.39%. Next slide, please. So now Cambodia has suffered from new variant COVID-19 Delta form. Okay. So we just found many cases in Phnom Penh and also in province near the border. So total number 838, women 405. Next slide, please. So this is the data from MOH about the situation COVID in Asia. So Cambodia, we got less in COVID-19 and also rate death also less compared to other country. Next slide, please. And also we see diagram for the same. Okay. Cambodia also in the far mean we got less infection and death rate. So next slide, please. Okay, you see the rate death of the Asia country MOH report. Okay, next slide, please. So Cambodia, they have strategy to prevent the COVID-19. So Cambodian government still continue the vaccination in province and minority people in the province. So now on mass collecting sample, it continue to find more case in advance. Although the pandemic has reduced, but government measures must be continued. Until now, today, the rate of the COVID-19 start reducing in Cambodia. But people must take attention to what infection. Border and international gate of flight must be secure. We need to make the quarantine for that people. Stop fly from the country, more COVID-19, mean fly restricted. Okay, next slide, please. So the type of variant of COVID-19. So in Cambodia, we had we just found the COVID-19 and also variant Delta. Only we found two this. And other we don't yet found. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, you see in made of Cambodia. Okay, so okay, finish my slide. Okay, so if you have something, you can ask me. Okay, Nisi PDA founder in Cambodia, 2016. Okay, next slide, finish. Okay, you can contact my organization through this website. Okay. Yes, finish. Okay, thank you. Yes. I see the Okay, thank you so much. My presentation is finished. Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Sien. So very clear that the vaccination progress of Cambodia is pretty well under the COVAX program,
Yes.
and the total population of Cambodia is about 16 million.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
right.
and I'm pretty much interested when you put the total, you always put women. So not sure why have the women as the indicator in the COVID infect case.
Yeah, my slide is all can be not yet put. We will provide later. Okay.
Okay, so right now we come to the round table session, which I would like to invite every speaker panelist to open the video, please. And I'm going to pass the microphone to our moderator, Professor Dr. Phonsak Siamonsak. So I will be just the helper to Dr. Phonsak in case of anything on the question. So Dr. please take your.
Okay, thank you, Rose. And now we come to the panel discussions, and then we will go to the Q&A later. As you know that the COVID-19 is widely acknowledged to be a game changer in the understandings of pharmaceutical supply concerns, but will it fit effort to create local supplies of chemicals and APIs as a matter of national security? Pharma businesses were aware of their reliance on complicated supply network in the previous years. As a consequence, the pandemic has ultimately pushed all stakeholders to strengthen their supply chains in the futures. And we all know that almost 40% of registered sites of the APIs were located in India or China. And this has a direct effect on the supply chain's reliabilities and has resulted in medication shortage during the lockdowns and the transit closures. Of course, the global shipping crisis intensified the situation as well. So in these sessions, we will learn how manufacturers in various countries deal with these problems and what the best practices they discover and could share with others. So probably we start with the US first with the research from the PDAs. May I ask, in your opinions, what choose the, we start with the authorities or FDA first. What should the FDA do to strengthen the pharmaceutical productions and distribution during these pandemics? Any policy recommendations for them?
I mean, I can tell you because of course, I talk to people not just in the US, but around the world. But in the United States, the federal government, the national government, is making some investment in trying to encourage some manufacturing of APIs in the United States. And I know that there is some discussion about that in other parts of in Europe, for example. But you know, I think that the economics that have driven that to occur in the first place, the question is, will we learn from this experience or will we go back to the same way? The reason that, you know, when I started in industry, there were a lot of APIs were made in many different countries, as were finished drugs. but the economics and the availability of the global distribution system made that economically undesirable. So there is some investment going on to try to reduce that dependency, but I think that to be realistic, there is so much need that I don't think we're going to see a dramatic shift in the importance of API suppliers from countries like India and China, because they've made substantial investments in capacity. It would take a lot of investment and a lot of effort to catch up with that. And the costs might be much higher. So I think that's a challenge. But what I do see a lot is that companies are developing multiple sources for some of these ingredients, so that in the future, we're not quite so dependent upon getting material from one geography that might be, might be affected by something like a pandemic. But unfortunately, I think for APIs, that's still going to be a global marketplace, and that will continue for a while. For finished product, I think that could be a little more distributed. But I would also make a comment that for the small molecule products, India and China are dominant in the production of APIs. But with the biologic products, that's not the case currently. A lot of the APIs for biologic products, which are becoming a bigger and bigger part of the overall number of therapeutic products, those are more likely to be manufactured in international locations, in Europe, in the US, in Singapore, in Japan, and so on. South Korea is becoming very important. And I think once we get beyond the immediate pandemic problem, I think the investment is going to continue to go after those new products that are mostly biologic.
Yes, thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. So I agree that the risk management is important for the industry to adjust the source of the APIs from different geographies. I mean, not only from the same geographies. That would be the great idea to share with others as well. Also, let's move to others' questions. Probably we can go to Thailand, TPMA. May I ask, what did the TPMA suggest to the government or like the Ministry of Health to prepare for the pandemics? I mean, when the pandemic starts in Thailand, do you have any action?
Thank you. Yes, I think a lot of problem in Thailand bases on the forecast of number of the infected people. Early this year, in January, March, we don't have much of the people get infected, and so the prediction of number of people quite low, meaning that the government only ordering sufficient amount of drugs, finished products for supplying to the hospital. And of course, with today's situation, we are running out of some of the very important medicines. I think most of them basis upon the forecast of the number of people get infected, which is very difficult. I listened to many of the talk or discussion around the world, and people are saying that expert in a special area for this pandemic making wrong forecasts around the world. So it is not happening only in Thailand. I think having a right forecast is a bit difficult, but giving more inventory in the stock may be a better choice, because Thai government, which is the government system, they are still keeping their stock level quite low. We are talking only about 1 or 2 months of supplies only. Even still today, all the calculation are basis on that. So I think with such a high variation of infected people, maybe it's easier for the government to raise up on their stock level for this COVID-19 medicine, and maybe up to 4 to 6 months, because these are medicine that in one day, at least 3 to 6 months will be all used up anyway. So to have less impact on the variation of number of infected people, which is very difficult to forecast. Maybe a number of stock for the government should be rise up. That's my suggestion.
Okay, so that would be no problem during the short time, like 3 to 6 months, I think. And however, the Thailand is not only provide the medicine only in Thailand, but also export to neighboring country. Is it still okay to export those medicines like to neighboring countries?
Yes, in general, we only have problem with some very specialized product for COVID-19, which may be only like 1 or 5% of the total export market. Majority of our market exporting products are not related to COVID-19, but being impacted by the COVID-19. Because people are wearing masks around the world, less people going to the hospitals and clinics. So it's happened worldwide that the size of the market has been declining, as well as exporting in Thailand to the ASEAN country. But I'm still witnessing a higher potential of the growth for the 3rd and 4th quarter this year for export market to the ASEAN.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kulachot, for the answers. Probably we move to the Cambodia, which they mostly imported the pharmaceutical from Thailand, I think mostly. So let me ask, since did you experience the unexpected increase in demands for critical medications during the pandemics? Any problem with the logistics or the imported drugs to Cambodia? Please open the microphone first.
Unmute, please. Unmute. You are mute.
Open the microphone, please. Okay.
Yes, and COVID-19, the transport has some problem. We have locked down many places, many areas, and also in Phnom Penh. So the transport, the product like medical device or some other health care product has some problem. And now the border with Cambodia, Thailand border is also closed. So the transport has some problem. And more Cambodian distributor also has faced some problem for the product from Thailand. But other product like from India, from other Pakistan, it look like no problem. But the fee has increased so much. So. Okay, but from Europe also has no problem. But I think so. In this period, still had the import from the abroad still not problem. So can import.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No problem with the import, but the cost may be increased a bit, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Here.
Okay. Okay. Let's move to like Philippines. During the lockdown, because the lockdown have resulted in a shortage of the raw material required for the manufacturing, and has this caused a stop in manufacturing of the certain medicine in Philippines? May I ask?
Yes. During the enhanced community restriction, the manufacturer, especially for pharma and food, are allowed to operate on full capacity, provided there is enough guarantee for the health and safety of the workers. So we've implemented certain strict health protocols and mandated by the interagency task force against COVID-19. Unfortunately, we suffered also scarcity of supply, as I already mentioned, that more than 60% of the medicines in the Philippines are imported, and due to the logistical restriction during the quarantine restrictions, the imported finished products are not coming in. And not just the imported products, but the APIs and the packaging materials that we are manufacturing. Much as we want to fully operate our production facility, but without those raw materials and packaging materials, we're having problem. For 7 decades now, since the inception of the Philippine Pharma Industry Association, PPMA, we are celebrating this year the 70th anniversary. The market is really dominated by foreign brands, imported products, and there was no full support from the government in strengthening local manufacturer. In fact, in my presentation to the Philippine Congress, I told them that in fact the Department of Health is our competitor, because 100% or most, if not 100% of the products, pharma products being bought by DOH are all imported from India, from China, from Pakistan, until this pandemic came. And they realized the need for resiliency and self-sufficiency in the supply of the medicines in the country. So right now, there are several legislation that are being done, and the enhancement of the processes in the in FDA regulatory process, especially in support for the variation guidelines, because definitely we can strengthen our manufacturing and increase our production, but we cannot be competitive with China and India in the manufacture of the raw materials and packaging materials. So what do we need to do? We ensure that we strengthen our procurement and explore other sources from all other countries. And FDA should help us in expediting the regulatory processes. Because even if we don't have API manufacturing facility in the Philippines, But if most of the products are locally manufactured, we have inventories across the supply chain that we can easily produce to supply the needs of our population. I even told the Philippine Congress before that I envy Indonesia, because if you want to market your pharma product in Indonesia, you have to deal with the local manufacturer. I envy Thailand, because 85% of the requirement of the government for the pharmaceutical products are being sourced from the local manufacturer. And I envy Vietnam, because their government have a program of increasing the share of the local manufacturer from 50% to 70% in the next 5 years. 20 years ago, the share of local manufacturer in the supply of the medicines in the Philippines was almost 40%. Last year, 2 years ago, we're down to 32%. So this is a great realization from the government. That's the reason why we are getting the much needed support for the local pharmaceutical manufacturers. And I think we need to strengthen that, not just each country, but the entire Southeast Asia, because the biggest growth is in our region. And through collaboration with different countries, we can work together in the supply of the raw materials, other products, because each country have their expertise. Each country have their unique capabilities, so we can complement each other. For the Philippine local manufacturer, we cannot manufacture everything. But I suggested to the Philippine government that for the products that we are capable of manufacturing, give us priority. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you for your information.
If I could just add a comment there to what JP said, because one of the observations that I've had or I've seen made also is that when we compare manufacturing capabilities in the US, manufacturing capabilities in Europe, one of the strengths of the US response, even if the government got many other COVID-related decisions wrong, their establishment of the BARDA organisation, the Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority, provided a very strong impetus to building capacity and investing in capacity, and for manufacturers to take risk in producing advanced stocks and things like that. What the EMA observed, or what the European Union observed, was that they did not have such an organisation, and so they felt they didn't respond as effectively. And that's we've seen that in Asia, I think, because so much of the stocks or the inventories of vaccines, we were depending upon European supply as well. So I think as you move towards establishing manufacturing capabilities across countries and sharing those capabilities, having an organisation that's capable of kind of driving that process and bringing the right level of standardisation and harmonisation, not just from a regulatory level, but from an operating quality level, so that we get a solid platform across the countries in the region that gives us the capability to respond to future scenarios, because a pandemic situation like we're in now is not the last time this is going to happen, and we need to be ready for the next.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Actually, that is the question that I'm going to ask about the supply chains management already, but you have did. Okay, so maybe I ask you another question regarding the distributions of the pharmaceutical products, because we already know that the appropriate control of the distributions can have the good impacts on the qualities of pharmaceutical products. But in your comment, the good distribution practice or GDP is brought to the, I mean, like in Thailand, we're going to implement the GDP soon next year. Do you have any comment, especially for vaccine or other serious medications?
Yeah, I think where we're talking about those products that are being sourced from international manufacturers, when we put the infrastructure in place for distribution, this has to be aligned with international standard. So the investment that we're making in infrastructure, people, systems, processes is being built to ensure that we're managing that integrity of product right through the supply chain and therefore guaranteeing patient safety. And so I think the capabilities and the capacities exist. One of the challenges I think is that because demand is or continues to outstrip supply, we haven't seen the supply chains in Asia for vaccines under stress yet. And it will be interesting as more volume becomes available and we start to see that heading towards Asia, how the different stakeholders and the different components of the supply chain operate together to make sure that we continue that level of performance. I think we've kind of had a bit of a warm up with the availability of supply to date, but we're not operating at scale in that sense.
Yeah. Thank you for your comment. Okay, probably we can move to like the last speakers from Indonesia. So may I ask how can the government or pharmaceutical companies handle the vaccines logistic to achieve like 75% vaccinated dose to the people in
Yes, actually that the vaccine now is one of the what is not a problem, but it's our temptation, because you know that Indonesia is a big country. We are about 270 million people, and we spread in around 70,000 islands. So you can imagine that how we distribute the vaccine to the small island. And you know that we have a big island like Java, Sumatra, Kalimantan, Irian, and Sulawesi. From that big island that we concentrate our vaccine to deliver, and we have also a committee for that. So nowadays we understand that it's not 100% we succeed to deliver, because the problem is for us, for the big country like us, to make everybody aware to get a vaccine from the government, because some area they still have they didn't believe that the vaccine will cure their COVID-19. That's the problem. But now we try every day, I can say that we see that in Indonesian television that every day that the government also announce or inform everything about the vaccine, how they will get the vaccine, very easy. Starting that we should have an identity, like identity card nowadays, that if you come to the vaccine area, you just come and you will get the vaccine. So we try to have the vaccine distribute like that. I think I answer your question.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I think that is the same problem with other countries as well. The confidence of the vaccines and then the vaccine distributions to all parts of the countries, especially in your country, that is the islands, many islands in your countries. Okay, thank you. Okay, then we go for the Q&A session. We have the question from the audience. Probably we can start.
Before we go to Q&A session, there is the question actually from regulatory that pass to me to
Yes.
to every country. I would say that we are talking a lot about production and supply challenge. And we are talking about vaccine. We are talking about we are importing API. We are importing finished dosage from. The question is, what do you see what each country see the major important factors that can sustain or make your country medicine security? So I would go for JP first.
Yes. Okay. Currently, we are crafting the roadmap, Philippine pharmaceutical industry roadmap. Because in order to achieve resiliency and self-sufficiency, we need to have a roadmap first. What is our vision for the country in the pharma industry? What needs to be done? What supports are needed from the various government agencies related to our industry? Now, we are getting that much support. And in fact, we've been meeting every 2 months because our objective is to have the Pharma roadmap by the end of this year and implement that. And then together with it, the various the Philippine Congress legislators are helping us revise, amend the different laws that hampers the development, especially of the local capability, local manufacturing. And DOST also is focusing on helping in the research and development because that is one aspect that we did not focus in the last 4 decades. Now, we are trailing behind the other ASEAN countries in research and development because right now what we are focusing on is just to have enough supply of the common medicines from other countries, but we are not even talking about new technologies. What can the Philippines offer to the other countries? So we are seeing a brighter future now that the government is awake and realized the need for resiliency and self-sufficiency, and everybody is on their toes to really help, especially the local manufacturer. I've been as president of Philippine Local Pharmaceutical Association. I'm biased to local manufacturing, but as I said, having self-sufficiency or resiliency in the supply of medicine does not mean manufacturing it all locally. But what is needed is for those medicines that we are capable of manufacturing, we manufacture it. For the products and medicines that we don't have capability, we enable ourselves to be able to produce that in the future. For the products, unique products, patented products that we don't have capability of manufacturing, then we enhance the logistical process so that anytime we can have a source of those products. So that's it.
Okay,
Thank you, JP. So go next to Pakendra.
Yes, it's a good question. So your question is, what is the most important things to handle the pandemic or vaccine? As I said before, that Indonesia is a big country, 270 million people. But now we are lucky that our government, we already get the confirmation to get the vaccine. But the problem is to distribute the vaccine itself. as I said to you, that we are so many islands, 5 big islands and 70,000 islands. So this is our really problem. And you know that to deliver the vaccine is not like we deliver other goods. Yeah, we have to really protect that vaccine. So when our people receive the vaccine, they will receive it in a good condition. Nowadays that we have so many committee in Indonesia, like a big committee led by our president, and after that, 2 ministry or 3 ministry also held the committee, so they control every step of our what is vaccine distribution. Nowadays, that I know that we are also not quite fast, but I think that we move already. And today that we also know that the vaccine or the COVID-19 in Indonesia also decreasing from just imagine that from around 50,000 people infected per day, now it's already 9,000. But hopefully it will be decline again, so we can live as before. I think that's my answer, Rose.
If we are talking about medicine security, like you are talking about API import, 98% only can produce.
Oh yeah.
So what do you see the major factor to remain medicine security, sustain medicine for the population?
Yeah, Rose, that yes, you know that we are still 95% imported API, but nowadays in the pandemic era, we are lucky that we are not so difficult to get the API. We get it from mostly from China. We have the good relationship with China, so we have no problem for that. But the problem is the market itself. The market itself, when we produce the product in Indonesia, I think we have to sell it to distribute it to others. But because now everybody concentrate to the product for COVID-19. So if you see that in Indonesian market, mostly we produce vitamin, but the main product is still following that vitamin market. Yes, we have the difficulty for that, but hopefully that we can handle it.
Okay, so Kun Lachot ka.
Okay, securing supply chain in Thailand. I think it's a similar situation in ASEAN. Supplying a country like India and China, we actually found very little problem for them to supply us the API. Giving them sufficient time, they would be able to supply these API to us. So I think back to the inventory forecasting and who is going to carry the stock is more to the valid question, because government themselves still, as I mentioned, do not plans to rising up their inventory levels. So the order is very urgent at all time, and that will be a reason why we have sometimes a shortage of the supply. But for Thailand, we have a special condition than the other, as many of us here already know. We have local herb products, which from our field experience using in the hospitals, we realize that it can handle COVID patient with mild and moderate symptom. And for that particular case in Thailand, we need to have enough raw material of the herbs. As you already know, the endophthalmitis is the major one that we are in short. So if we can securing this enough supply from the farmer themselves, I think that would help reducing number of deaths in Thailand down sufficiently. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So come to Brett. Any idea from regional perspective for the medicine security? Brett, you mute, please. Unmute.
I think I've seen one of the questions in the question box as well on the topic of the role of ASEAN, and I think ASEAN has a strong role to play in this particular area. I think they are. I think there are discussions taking place amongst the countries in terms of the regulation that they need to have. They're looking at what is taking place around the rest of the globe, and there are organisations that are strong on driving regulatory convergence, which I think will assist. And then it's about being prepared, countries being prepared to invest in specific areas of production capability.
Okay, so come to the last one. I will ask Richard to give the idea from your perspective.
I think all of the speakers have touched upon the challenges that this situation has brought up. The only one that I didn't hear anybody talk about is in most of the countries in the world and in Southeast Asia, the government controls the prices for the products. And, several people have talked about the difficulty to have local manufacturing compete on price with some of the other areas. So I think governments can make some decisions about what they will pay for certain pharmaceutical products so that they incentivize local manufacturing. That's the same point that was raised about inventory levels. I can speak for, what I've seen around the world. When at the height of the hospitalizations, it's not just vaccine we're talking about, it's all of the other therapies for people with severe respiratory disease. And those products, the demand dramatically increases far beyond normal conditions in something like a pandemic. So having some safety stock to plan for having sufficient safety stock to insulate the population from those kinds of unusual circumstances, I think is another thing that I know that there's a lot of discussion going on in many countries about that very thing. So it's sourcing and having multiple sources to have greater resiliency in the supply chain, but it's also about inventory levels so that when unusual things happen, you have time to react. You have time to make adjustments before a crisis sets in. And unfortunately, in this pandemic, many countries, including the United States, were not prepared for that. And I think the question will be whether or not collectively we learn from this experience and prepare ourselves for the next one. And certainly hearing a lot of the discussions going around, it's encouraging to hear that many countries are having this kind of discussion.
Thank you, Richard. So Ajahn Kha, I move back to you.
Okay. Actually, as the time limitation, so maybe I ask just a few questions from the audience. Okay. We have the question regarding the vaccines, the Pfizer vaccines that just have been approved from the FDA. Can you give a time frame for it to be available in community pharmacy? Probably, Richard, can you give any comments on the Pfizer vaccine?
So I think what the questioner is referring to is the fact that just on My Today, yesterday, the US FDA fully approved the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. So that is an important development, but that doesn't mean that every regulatory agency in every country has approved that. That is one of the products that was one of the first ones to get approved under emergency use in the United States. It's been widely distributed in the United States. But I will also tell you that, the demand, we still have a lot of people in the United States. Several speakers talked about vaccine hesitancy. We have a lot of that in the US. Maybe that will change a little bit now that this vaccine has been approved. But they're also talking about needing booster shots. And so from a short-term supply impact, I think that's going to have a negative impact on the worldwide supply, because now, I heard in Indonesia, you need 360 million doses. If you need 3 shots, you're going to need 480 million doses. And you multiply that by all the countries of the world, that's the impact. On the other hand, the Pfizer and the other mRNA vaccines, such as the Moderna vaccine, they also are the ones that require the ultra low temperature storage, which would be especially problematic in countries where the distribution is difficult. It's difficult in the US. There were many pharmacies and many hospitals that did not have that capability when the vaccine first became available. So that is a challenge. One thing I didn't hear anybody talk about, but has been a major issue, is having the healthcare system be ready to deliver so many doses. I know people who have been involved in the government efforts in Europe and in the US, just getting mobilized to deliver that many vaccines. These are sterile injectable products. That is a major effort. And that's compounded by having more remote locations in your various countries. It's one thing to do that in a major city like Singapore, but in Indonesia, when you get to some of those 70,000 islands you mentioned, I can only imagine what it's going to be like to get a healthcare worker there with this properly stored vaccine and the administration equipment to do that. So I think that the good news is the capacity to produce the vaccines in US and in Europe has dramatically increased and is continuing to increase. So I think that's going to have an impact, not just on the US and in Europe, but in the rest of the world as those vaccines start to become distributed in those countries. But the vaccines that are the most well studied and the first ones likely to be formally approved beyond emergency use are also the vaccines that require the extra storage conditions, the extra handling and care, which is going to be even more of a challenge to manage the distribution and even in the healthcare. I can tell you that I've heard firsthand from people that many doses of vaccine have had to be destroyed because once those vaccines are prepared for injection, they have a very short shelf life. And if they don't deliver the vaccines within a very short shelf life, then they have to destroy them. And so that's another element of this, that the governments are really extremely important. So we should all be supporting their efforts in that at the same time that we support the effort to get the product to them so that it can be delivered to those in those healthcare settings. In the US, I got my vaccines. I got both doses of the Pfizer vaccine. It was administered at a government site by military personnel. So that's how in the US it was handled, where they had National Guard troops that were medical people that were actually administering vaccines. And I'm sure in many other countries, this is going to go beyond the capacity of the standard healthcare network to administer, and it's going to need that kind of special effort, not just in the administration, but in the logistics to get it to those places. So it's a challenge. I probably told people at PDA many times now, I am tired of trying to predict what this virus is going to do. You know, the Delta variant is much more easily transmitted. We've seen reactions in many countries to require more lockdowns, more restrictions. But what worries me is the next variant and the next variant, because the longer this remains circulating anywhere in the world, the more likelihood that a variant will emerge that our current vaccines are not effective against. And that's when we go back to where we were a year ago. And so I think the sooner we can all work together to get the current vaccines distributed and get that 70–80% of the population to be vaccinated, that's the best thing that we can do to restrict that possibility from happening. So.
Okay, thank you, Richard, for your comment. I think we run out of time, so
yes,
yeah, probably the Q&A sessions can be maybe ended here. And
yes.
For the questions, probably the speaker can go to write down the answers in the Q&A questions over the Zoom application. And then I return the stage to Rose.
Thank you, Dr. Pornsak. So I will pass the question to our related speakers. So come to the last part. When we have the beginning, we will have the end. So I would like to invite our co-hosts of this session that working together with me from PDA Asia Pacific, Marcel Evalds. He is the Executive Director from PDA Asia Pacific, to give a thanks word to all of our speaker and audience. Marcel, please.
Indeed. Good morning, and thank you very much for the honor of having to close today's meeting. I first of all wanted to start by thanking CPhi for doing this meeting together with PDA Asia Pacific, and thank all our faculty for spending their morning with us. And in case of our president, Richard, it's nearly midnight, so thank you for staying up this late. I also wanted to invite everybody who's here to please use your PDA members to relate the issues to us, and therefore, you know, use our network that we have to address some of the issues that you have, and also let us support you in your learning. If you are not a PDA member and you are a professional in the manufacturing industry, it would make good sense for you to join our community and take advantage of the many, not only committees, but also education and documentation that we have. We do have a wide range of technical reports that are on our website, and I highly recommend everybody to take a look at pda.org to see what we have available. And as Brett already mentioned, we're having 3 upcoming events very soon. The first one is actually a workshop on clean room technology, and then we have the manufacturing quality conference that is coming up October, but within the next month we have, sorry, I'm saying that wrongly. The manufacturing quality is coming up next month in September, and then in October we have the aseptic processing week. So again, you know, all the issues we've addressed here has been very useful. I think this is a good start. I think we can have definitely more dialogues I really appreciate all the associations that were represented here today to have shared your issues and taken the time to prepare for this. So thank you very much on behalf of PDA, and hopefully we can do this soon, and more hopefully we can do this in person someday soon. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. So to the audience, if you want to see the rerun of the session, you can look at the Facebook or YouTube of CPHI Southeast Asia to watch the rerun. And definitely, if you like to reach any of our speakers, please contact our CPHI team. You can reach to the country through the association we bring you up today. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ
Thanks everyone. Be safe.